The fifth chapter is about groups and organizations. A group is simply made up of more than one human being. Two people is a group, three people are a group. There are different kinds of groups. There are things called primary groups, and those are groups where you're close to the people that are in the group. For example, family usually is a very primary group. Your gang that you belong to, buddies, maybe, is a primary group. Secondary groups are groups where you only meet infrequently or for a very special kind of purpose. For example, going to Sunday school, or being in the third grade or the eighth grade, or being a sophomore in college. You belong to groups in which you don't know everybody in the group very, very well, not like you know those in your family or in the gang you hang around with. Primary groups have close relationships and attachments, and you know people fairly intimately. There are different kinds of group leadership, too, and we'll study those in the chapter. And you will probably recognize some of the characteristics of authoritarian leaders, of laissez-faire or democratic leaders. These are people who behave differently in terms of leadership in the group. And then there are all kinds of problems of conformity in a group. Too much conformity can produce sterility and stasis and stagnation. Because there's not much opportunity for innovation if everybody conforms continuously. So there are a lot of studies of conformity and their impact upon groups. Americans tend to conform, and some of the studies in your book will bear out that Americans are substantially conformists. There are all kinds of in-groups and out-groups. You know that from being in school. There are people who are leaders and represent some kind of an elite in elementary, secondary school, big shots. And then there are out-groups, people who aren't big shots, people who are excluded, people who are on their own and more isolated. And group size. There are factors to consider in terms of group size. Two people, ironically, are called a dyad. And that dyad is a very, very formal organization, frequently involved in marriage of two people. And boy, the pressure when there are two people together is enormous. There's no third party to go to. That's why marriage counselors are a third party frequently. When a dyad doesn't work, they go to somebody else to find out how to get out of the difficulty that they're in, how to talk better to the person that they're having trouble talking to. So, group size is big. And the bigger it gets, though, the more likely you're going to have rules and regulations and organization in order for the group to be effective. Because you can't rely on personal relationships any longer. So you start to build regulations and things of that sort. These are formal organizations. And formal organizations are usually those that are based upon some kind of bureaucracy. And bureaucracy has formal characteristics. You should be able to identify what they are and to know what is it that makes a bureaucracy work. Then you also ought to figure out why bureaucracies don't work at all times. Sometimes they don't work worth a darn. In the Army, there was an expression, in the military, the Navy, and the Air Force, too, and the Marines, called snafu. Snafu, spelled S-N-A-F-U, means things are all screwed up. Snafu means, all the letters mean, situation normal, all fouled up. So, bureaucracy, big bureaucracies like the military, like the government, like hospitals, they have problems of organization, and you should know what those problems are. Why don't they always work to maximize efficiency? Why are they sometimes inefficient? And how do you solve those problems of big organizations? So you should know that there are changes that have occurred in the way large organizations have worked. Your book lists a bunch of challenges. One of them is that people usually get excluded in most bureaucracies. The question is who does the exclusion and why? And in large organizations there is exclusion. Who gets cut out? Frequently, these are matters of ethnicity. Who gets hired? Who do you know? Do you hire your cousin Billy, or do you hire the person most qualified? Race is a factor. Firemen, for example, have a very tight organization, and so do police. So, as a consequence, black folks in the United States have had a difficult time entering police forces and fire departments, but they're getting better. The same thing applies to women. Women had an awful battle getting into the fire departments and into the police. But they're doing better, and there are more and more women involved in these large organizations now. There's another kind of problem, other than race and gender, that is that we've discovered that some kinds of organizations work better than our historical bureaucracies. The Japanese, for example, created something called a Z organization, or Z for the letter Z. The Z organization works much more collectively. Frequently in Japanese organizations, they don't fire workers. They try to make them work better. If they don't work very well, they try to improve their work. And usually when you're hired, you're there for life. And so they work very hard at it. And the company plays a very important role intimately with your life. There are company camps, company homes, company hospitals, company dispensaries, all sorts of things, company stores, so that people feel as though they belong to the firm and own the firm. So, and frequently in those kinds of organizations, the hierarchy, the distance between a CEO, a chief executive officer, and a person just hired off to sweep floors, that social distance is not as great. Neither is the economic distance. Our CEOs make a fantastic amount of money, more so than any other industrial country on earth, compared to entry-level people. The Japanese, there's not that much difference between the CEO and an entry-level person. And indeed, sometimes that's acted out in terms of roles, so that you'll find the CEO picking up a broom and sweeping, or picking up some litter and trash, which isn't part of his role usually. But just to show that he can do these things and is willing to do them, they do them, they act them out. That's the Z organization. That's a second challenge, in addition to getting people in, like race and gender. And the third challenge your book mentioned is that work itself has changed. The computer and the internet have made it possible for lots of work to be done in this information revolution. Not necessarily within formal organizations. The internet has made it possible for people to communicate great distances and across time and across gender and across race, so that the nature of work itself and the communication problems associated with work are not as great as they are in old organizations. So it may be the wave of the future. It may be that the Z organization, or its format, if it's combined with computerization and the use of the internet, may very much affect the nature of our large groups and our large organizations. Those are the kind of things that are treated in the chapter. I hope that you find them interesting, and I look forward again to discussing them, all of these things with you. Take care.